Welcome to the build guide for Trial by Stone from BrokenToad, Blacksun Miniatures and the Jim Henson Company. Okay, so first of all, we'll look at the base sections. Now, there are large tabs on the bottom. You can use what's called a jeweler's saw, which is what I have here, which is a good way of trimming off larger sections of material. If you do only have clippers and a scalpel, please don't try and take off the whole thing at once because you could damage the base underneath. So just take it off piece by piece, just nice and slowly. Don't take too much off at any one time, and then trim it down with the scalpel and tidy up any edges. If you need to give it a rub down with some sandpaper afterwards, that might be a really good idea. And the bases only fit one way. There is a raised section on the middle part where the stone goes, and that lines up with one of the bases. Each of the figures has almost an outline in the base, which means they will only fit on one base. So we'll start with the stone, and we need to clean off the excess resin from the bottom there. Now, if you're going to cut it from those angles, place it on a table so it's nice and supported. What might be easier as well is just to trim off that larger piece with a pair of clippers, like so. As always, if you're new to the hobby, please take exceptional care when working with sharp instruments such as scalpels. Don't apply too much pressure. If you need to shave it off in slightly smaller chunks like so, that might be a good idea. And if you are younger, please seek adult supervision. So we'll just trim that down, and then we'll get it sorted into its I think holder or display is probably the best term for that collection of what I assume are bones. So it fits in with the larger chunk that's missing from the stone towards the more sort of ornamented side of the plinth, and it has these little arms that hold the other sides. So we'll just trim off the excess, make sure there's no mold lines, and then we'll fit those in place. As always, give everything a good test fit just to make sure you know where it goes and to make sure it fits correctly and doesn't need any adjustments. So those fit in that side. So they're almost like hands, so where the thumb, or what effectively would be the thumb and forefinger of those hands, they go towards where the larger chunk on the stone is. Takes a bit of a push, but that'll seat nicely once it's in. There we go. And you can see those hands hold the corners of the stone itself. So now we've test fitted all of that, we'll glue it together, and then we'll move on to the other things. So a little bit of super glue, and we'll pop that in place. It's a very secure connection, so you only need to put super glue onto the locating pegs. And that's the other arm in place. Now you can glue this straight to the middle section of the base, but for painting purposes it might be best to leave it off for the time being. So next we'll move on to the chamberlain, and we'll just tidy up any excess pieces of resin and casting gates from the miniature. There is one that goes through the sword hilt. You can see it is a sort of tube shape, which is very distinct, so you can see exactly which part needs to be cut out. Just take care. It's not a massively delicate piece, but obviously if you're too rough with it, it will break, so just be careful. Then trim off those excess resin pieces on the handle of the sword and on the sword itself. And just make sure those locating pegs are nice and square. There's a little mould line down the side of the handle as well, so just trim that down. Now the hilt fits onto the handle with the larger section towards the back, and then the sword blade sort of joins the two together with the peg that goes through the hilt and into the handle. Now you could have it all as one and glue it all together like that. That would work. I did it in sections. It just seemed a little bit easier because there are certain locating points that you need to think about. So on the bottom of the chamberlain himself, there's a large tab of excess resin which needs to be carved down. When you are carving, don't apply too much pressure. You don't want to slip and hurt yourself. And just trim away any excess around the edges of the model itself. Okay, so assembling the sword. Now the trickiest part is that the hilt fits into a recessed area on his body. However, there is a slight piece of flash right in the crevice, which I shall show in a second, which stops it from going in all the way. So you need to just gently carve that out, and you'll see that the recess on his body is the same as the hilt itself. Once you've carved out a little extra piece of resin, it'll fit nicely into place. You can see there it's flush up against the body, and all the curves and indentations match up. So because that's quite a tricky piece, we'll probably get that glued in first, and then we'll attach the other pieces. There's a notch on the chamberlain's shoulder where the blade of the sword sits as well. So again, just take your time, test fit everything, so you can see how it fits together. So if it is other hand, that will go on last, and that fits over the bottom of the sword handle. Okay, so right, we'll get these glued into place. So a little bit of super glue in the indentation that fits the hilt. And get that in. And then we'll put the handle in. So a little bit of glue on the locating pegs for the hand. Don't put any glue at the top where the hilt is, because if that dries before you get a chance to put the sword blade in, you don't want to block the path of the sword blade, the locating peg. So glue on the locating peg of the sword blade itself, and you want just a tiny bit on the notch on the shoulder. So I just used the tip of my scalpel with a bit of super glue on there. And you just press that into place. So there we go, that is the sword all complete. And we'll pop the other hand on. You want glue in 2 places on this, and there is a slight mould line on one of the inside of the fingers as well, so just clean that up. Be very careful with this, you don't want to glue this to your fingers accidentally, so a bit of glue on the inside of the hand and on the locating peg, so that it's glued in 2 points and creates a nice secure connection to the sword. There we go. Right, last piece for the Chamberlain is his head. So again, clean up any excess, and this is a nice simple one, so just a little bit of glue onto the peg and he's done. That's him on his base, looking rather splendid. And in case you're wondering, yes, the base with the slightly raised area is the Chamberlain's, and the Garthim Master's base has a slightly deeper recess which matches up with the bottom of his body. There is also a bit of excess flash on the bottom there which needs to be trimmed up. So for the Garthim Master, again, we'll clean off any excess. Just make sure there's no mould lines. For the armour that goes over his shoulders, be aware that each of these has locating pegs and locating holes, but for the order of them, if you'll pause the video in a second, I've laid them out in the order that they should be connected. But if you pay attention to how things fit together, it shouldn't be too bad to work out, but if you are a beginner, that's absolutely fine. And just pay attention in a second. So clean up anything that doesn't look quite right. Keep those square pegs on the ends. And this bit is the spine that goes on the back of the armour. So there's a little bit of excess resin on the top there, which just needs to be trimmed down. Okay, so if you pay attention to how I'm laying out these are left and right shoulders if the model is facing you. Okay, and these all slot together in sections of 3. So again, test fit everything. Don't assume something will fit together. Just make sure you know that it's going together, and we'll just glue these in place. Each of these 3 forms one complete unit, which can then go onto the model. Doesn't need much super glue for these, just something to secure the locating pegs. There we go, that's both sets of shoulder armour done. There is a little indent that coincides with each shoulder piece, so they'll only fit in one way. And again, a bit of super glue onto the locating peg, and a bit further down, you just want a slightly stronger connection on these. And that's the other side done. Next piece is the Garthim Master's head. Again, give it a clean up if you need to. little drop of super glue and pop him in. And then for the spine, there's a little piece of excess flash running down the centre as well, sort of a mould line, so just give that a quick scrape down. And then that piece fits on the back. Like so. Obviously this is the Garthian Master in his full angry, all of his armour sticking up pose. So for the sword, for this one I would suggest just gluing it all together, so you've got one piece that can go onto the model. Because the hilt doesn't sit into any recesses because he's holding the sword out in front of him. Hold that together for a few seconds and make sure that's nice and set. Once that's completely dried and nice and solid, you can pop the locating pegs into the sockets on the wrists. Like so. Now there's a few extra couple of pieces on Garthian Master. There are 2 holes each side for little ornamentations. They look like little feet, and this is a sort of claw section which goes in the middle. Claw section goes up there. And you'll need a piece of blue tack for the next piece, because these are very, very small. There are 3 of them, just in case you drop one, but they look like little feet, and the toes point downwards, and each end sits in a recess. But as you can see, you can't pick them up with tweezers, so you need a little bit of blue tack just to be able to pick them up. So please be very, very careful with these and don't drop them. You want to pop some super glue onto a piece of plastic so you can dip each end in. That might make things just a little bit easier. They're a nice fit, so you can pop them straight in. Just be very, very careful. And that is the Garthian Master all done. You can see that's the other side done. There's 2 of those little feet things on the back. And when you sort the display out, obviously you can decide how the stone sits and how you want them to look. But another fantastic kit from the BrokenToad, Blacksun Miniatures and Jim Henson Kickstarter. So, hope this has been useful. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.